It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. We really appreciate you making time for us. And, you know, it was great. I'm broadcasting today from Regina, Saskatchewan. I'm headed to Toronto, about to catch a flight. I've got a deal, a facilitation I've got to do tomorrow in Toronto. And so I was at Canada's Farm Show yesterday and really enjoyed myself. It was great. As I mentioned on Monday's show, I gave a keynote speech in the morning coming off the stage. I came onto the stage following Premier Saskatchewan Scott Moe. And then there was a huge announcement after my speech from GIFS, the Global Institute for Food Security, as well as FCC and the University of Saskatchewan. So we'll talk about that in the news segment. But I really enjoyed my time. It is really great to connect with the audience, you know, and have people come up to you afterwards and ask you questions and talk about the impact that this show is having on them. And a farmer came up to me from Churchbridge, Saskatchewan. And if you're listening, I really do appreciate that you did take the time. And I also talked to you outside in the Uber line as well. And, you know, when somebody says, you know, hey, I listen to the show all the time, I have a Sirius XM subscription in my vehicles and my tractor because I want to listen to this show. That you have no idea what that means to me as the host of this show. And, you know, doing this since 2016 and to have that kind of an impact and have people say that stuff, it really does. It's a heartwarming thing. And everybody has no idea how much passion we bring to this show on a daily basis. And any sort of movement to the needle or little pieces of impact that we can have on your farm business, it's what our goal is, and it means a lot when we get that feedback. So I really do appreciate when people do take the time to approach us at shows like that, where we have the opportunity to interact and not just broadcasting from a hotel room like I am now. It's always great to hear from the audience, so I do appreciate it. Today on the show, we're going to hear from Lance Zimmerman of Rabobank. They've got a Q2 cattle industry update that Rabobank has put out last week. And we're going to hear from Lance Zimmerman about what is going on in the cattle markets really across Canada and the U.S. Some concerning things there about, you know, where are we going with the cow herd based on some of the demand for meat that is out there. We're also going to hear from Nathan Phinney. He is the president of the Canadian Cattle Association. We're going to talk about these capital gains changes and why CCA is so concerned, along with a couple other issues as well. This is I'm looking forward to hearing from Nathan because CCA is doing a ton of lobbying work right now. We're also going to have a new edition of the Farm Safety Roundup. We're going to talk to Shawn Chadwick, and very timely topic. We're going to hear today about heat stress and working in hot temperatures because, boy, let me tell you what, the Eastern Seaboard, Central and Eastern Canada, it is hot, so hot that it's dangerous. And today's interview on heat stress is incredibly timely. So I'm glad that all worked out. And we're also going to have some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, I want to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line. Okay, the number is 855-776-6147. You know, so this week, busy week traveling, right? And it's kind of what it's been like here all of 2024. People continue to ask me, like, are you ever home? Not a lot. But that's kind of what the job entails. Friday night, I'm doing something very different. I've never done this before. I'm going to have to come up with some really inspirational words. I am going to be going down to Foremost, Alberta, a great agricultural community, okay? And a RealAg Radio listener, Shaun Haney, his youngest son is graduating in Foremost this year. And it's their high school graduation on Friday night. And so the Hardys have invited me to be the guest speaker at the graduation banquet. This is pretty cool. I'm looking forward to this. I got to admit, I'm not necessarily nervous, but I do want to make sure that I have a very, very good message for the students in a community that is very agricultural focused. Whether that's growing crops, there's livestock, there's a real rodeo route, like there's real rodeo routes in Foremost as well. Also, Foremost, Alberta, I would say maybe the home of the best rink burger in Canada. There's a lot of good ones. The one in the Foremost rink is amazing. So they have that going for them too. Also, some moisture this year, so people are going to be in a bit of a good mood. So I'm looking forward to connecting with listeners of this radio show down at Foremost on Friday night. But here's an opportunity for you. If you were talking to, because I've got an outline of what I want to say, but I'm interested what your feedback is. What are some of the things that you think graduating grade 12 students in a real rural community with close ties to this industry of agriculture, it really does float the community economically, and it is Foremost is not exactly close to a major center. It's kind of out by itself. What message would you have to those students? What are some thoughts? What advice would you give yourself if you were able to talk to yourself as a grade 12 student about to enter adult life, going to college, going to university, maybe going right into the workforce? Maybe you're going back to the farm or the ranch. Maybe you're not. Doesn't really matter. What message would you want to convey to yourself or a student that is in that situation right here, right now? I really appreciate your input on this, okay? So send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Lance Zimmerman of Rabobank. We're talking about the cattle markets when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch WheatPete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. It's June 19th today, and I opened the show and I forgot to say happy 25th anniversary to my good friends Norm and Sarah, who frequently listen to this program, and happy anniversary. I was at the wedding, and I saw some pictures in a texting group or a text group this morning, and yeah, we've gotten older. There's no question about it. Do you ever mentally think, I was talking to a friend of mine I ran into at the airport, Do you ever like imagine yourself like you're trapped at the age of 35? Like you're always going to be 35, or you're always going to be 25. For me, it's like 35. We were talking a university mate I ran into at the Calgary airport on Monday. We were talking about this, and then you see pictures like that, and you're like, compare to what you look like now. You're like, yeah, not trapped at 25 or 35. Yeah, wow, time does fly. But happy anniversary to Norman, Sarah. You know, there's a lot of risks out there in the markets. There's a lot of stuff happening around us. You know, you deal with many uncertainties on your farm. Managing risk should not be one of them. M&P's ag team specializes in risk management. Visit mmp.ca to learn how you can stay ahead of the game and plan for the unknown. You know, and I mentioned this stat before, but, you know, Real Agri Studies, our data shows that 75% of Canadian farmers and ranchers believe that this year is more risky than last year. Okay, 24 more risky than 23. So you do need to be preparing and have a risk management plan, and M&P obviously can help you out with that. I had a chance to chat with Lance Zimmerman, and we talked about what's going on overall in the North American beef and cattle markets. And let's listen to that discussion. Here's Lance Zimmerman of Rabobank. What do we know? What's our, I guess, the thing you're the most optimistic about versus the thing that concerns you the most?
Yeah, I think as you look at the cattle and beef markets across the U.S. and Canada, we dive into this in the Global Beef Quarterly. What's interesting is our markets are some of the strongest on the globe right now. And we converted everything in the report to U.S. dollars per kilogram. And it's pretty fascinating. Both the U.S. and the Canadian markets are at basically $4 a kilogram, a little bit above that. While a lot of other major global beef producers around the globe, Australia, New Zealand, Uruguay, Argentina, Brazil, their prices are trending lower. And so what we've seen develop over the course of the last 24 months is a differentiation in markets. What's going on in U.S. and Canada is in a clear uptrend over that time, while a lot of the other global beef markets are in a downtrend. So the good news here is as we look at it, we're seeing what continues to be exceptionally strong demand for beef across North America. It doesn't matter if it's Mexico, U.S., or Canada. Beef demand is holding up exceptionally well right now. And so that's the good news. The other side of that that's more challenging is, I think, as we look at the other end of the supply chain, where boots are on the ground, where ranchers are, it's still pretty tough. The U.S. is kind of trying to pull itself out of the drought that's been plaguing it for the last 3 years. Canada still very much so dealing with it. And Mexico is kind of a new entrant into it. And so as we look at it, we still have a lot of just basic, fundamental production challenges that are causing a lot of strife and challenges for producers today. We would love to get to a point where we talk about herd stabilization. I think that's going to be really challenging still in Canada, considering the current environment that's there. I think it's going to be easier in the U.S. if we can get past some of the drought challenges. And then Mexico is probably going to go from a place of herd growth, where they've been really the last several years, and probably just hoping to kind of keep things steady here for the next 12 to 24 months as they kind of try to reel themselves out of some pretty tough drought conditions here lately.
So you mentioned that North America is a little bit of isolated here when it comes to, you know, in comparison to Europe. Are we a laggard in that regard, or are we able to maintain these price levels?
I think right now we're going to be able to maintain these price levels. One of the things that's fascinating about beef consumers in North America is they're consuming the best quality of beef they ever have in their lifetimes. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about Canadian consumers eating Canadian grown beef, U.S. consumers eating primarily U.S. grown beef, or Mexico. All three national cow herds are producing some of the highest quality of beef they ever have before. And I think that that's really allowed beef on the plate to differentiate itself from the other animal proteins, where 20 years ago we probably talked a lot more about substitution and trading down.
Yeah.
And today I would tell you there's not as much of that substitution effect happening as long as consumer incomes hold up. And I think to your point, are we leading? Are we lagging? Are we differentiating ourselves from some of these other global markets? I think with each passing week, a lot of the macro level economists are gaining comfort around the idea that we don't necessarily have to go into a hardcore recession in North America, where over the course of the last couple of years, I think the discussion was, we're not in a recession yet, but man, the outlook for the next 6 months is awfully concerning. I think now we're starting to get to a place where we're all getting comfortable with that idea, right or wrong, that maybe we're in a place of just incredibly slow growth. And we're going to be challenged with stronger than normal inflation, stronger than what we became accustomed to interest rates. And that's going to put a damper on some things, maybe a little bit of some storm clouds on the horizon, but that the storm may never truly arrive. Or if it does, maybe it's just a couple rainy days and not a torrential downpour. And if that's the case, then I do think, as we look at, in particular, at our Canadian and U.S. beef markets, that these higher prices can be sustained for longer. And that's good news for all of the producers we work with every day, because it gives some confidence to the idea that maybe these market prices can hold up better longer. And that's really what we need to make the cattle producer whole again.
How is it impacting trade flows?
Yeah, trade flows, we're starting to see that shift happen. When you look at the U.S. right now in particular, certainly their exports are down. The three key markets there, South Korea, China, Japan, all of those represent a 25% decline in volumes over the last 12 months. As we look at imports coming into the U.S., that's been good news. If you're a Canadian producer excited about having an outlet for your particular markets. Right now, over the last 12 months, export or imports into the U.S. have been equally as strong as exports have been down, double-digit percentage growth in imports into the U.S. And as we look at some of those key markets, even if you just look at year-to-date import volumes, Canada's been a beneficiary of that. Australia's been a beneficiary of that. Even as you look at it, New Zealand, Brazil, Uruguay, all seen year-over-year growth in imports into the U.S. over the last 3 months or 4 months now. We got January through April data. Mexico's been the only one that's been a little bit softer, but I think that's just a short-term trend. Post-elections in Mexico, we've seen the peso really weaken. There's going to be a big value proposition to draw more of those Mexican imports into the U.S. as that product with the exchange rate effect is going to be more affordable as well. And so as we look at the trade flow, certainly it's a challenge having more expensive protein here in the U.S. and Canada, but the benefit to Canada is they have the U.S. market that's at such a supply deficit that they're able to feed into some of that.
That makes sense. You mentioned currency. When you mentioned Japan and their purchasing being lower, like some of that has to be relative to just the weakness we've seen in the yen, right?
It is, yeah. There's certainly some of that. There's also, we got to keep in mind that there is always economic concerns in each one of those different countries and warehousing of proteins that happens and things of that nature and their own production dynamics. Certainly that's the case when we talk about a country like China. And obviously they're a much bigger consumer of pork and chicken there as well, just to where they are from an economic standpoint and what those production dynamics are doing. In addition to, how's food service acting? What are consumers willing to do? Are they going out to eat a lot? Another big part when we talk about Japan, let alone from currency dynamics and macroeconomic factors, is also what are business travelers doing? And how does that influence a premium protein like beef? Because it's a destination item. And so when we talk about those different factors, all of those are having some varying degree of influence as we think about those Asian markets that obviously Canada and U.S. beef producers are so focused on right now.
Now, we've been talking a lot of real agriculture about what's happening with the HPAI, avian influenza related to dairy cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that having what impacts is that having relative to beef consumption? Like, this has been a hard. I continue to sort of track this and trace it. And as you put this report together, is that a factor at all at this point?
Yes and no. I would tell you the biggest factor that it has in a lot of these discussions right now, Shaun, is the idea of what are we doing from an animal health standpoint? What are we doing from an animal tracking standpoint so that we minimize the spread and impact of this virus within the cattle population? Right now, the great news is, as the virus stands today, the only way that virus is being transmitted from one cow to the other is through milking equipment and through animal handling, and some of those issues as it pertains to lactating dairy cattle. So that certainly minimizes the risk of spread into the beef industry. The other side of that discussion is, well, we do have a certain population of dairy cattle that get culled and could perhaps enter into the beef production system. I hope your listeners have a sense of humor, but I always joke that the Lifetime Achievement Award of every dairy animal is to end up beef, right?
Steak sandwich, baby.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, what's been fantastic is the government in the U.S. has taken a lot of responsibility in terms of trying to navigate, has this virus found its way into the supply chain? And in every step along the way, they've been able to demonstrate that virus has not been a concern from a food safety standpoint. They evaluated ground beef samples at retail stores in states where high-path avian influenza had been found and found no evidence of the virus in any retail ground beef samples. Then they went back to the packing plant level and said, let's look at cattle that inspectors identified from the onset as ineligible for slaughter because they showed some visible signs of illness. So they went to cattle that they'd already ruled ineligible to enter into the food supply and tested those cattle for evidence of the virus, particles of the virus. And they found, I think it was they tested over 100 of these cows, cull cows, that were already considered ineligible for the food chain. And actually only one of those 100 plus cows that they tested actually tested positive for virus particles. And so again, none of those animals entered into the beef production system. And so the good news is the governments went out of their way, I think, and went above and beyond board to make sure that the food supply chain is safe. They've gotten those test results out into the public. And right now, I think there's been no hint at this impacting beef demand whatsoever. But that's not at all shocking because we've been dealing with high-path avian influenza for over a decade and this particular strain for over 2 years. And we've not necessarily seen it result in a fall-off in broiler demand or turkey meat demand. Yeah. We have seen some impacts on egg demand, but I would argue that was more due to the fact that egg prices skyrocketed higher, and we actually did more harm to demand from a pricing impact than we really did any type of food safety concerns.
Hey, Lance, thanks for joining us here. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shaun.
If you want to read the entire report put up by Rabobank, we do have the link inside of a story and the full interview with Lance Zimmerman of Rabobank. Just go to RealAgriculture.com. We'll be right back. We're going to be talking to Nathan Phinney of CCA right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a new segment here on the show. Every so many weeks, it's going to be CCA Cattle Country. We're joined right now by the president of Canadian Cattle Association. It is Nathan Phinney. Hey, Nathan, how's it going?
Hey, Shaun. Going good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Well, hey, I'm looking at your video here right now, and looks like you're out doing some haying or silage, and how's that going?
Yeah, no, it's for Eastern Canada, it's been a good spring and good summer so far.
Well, we'd appreciate some of that better weather coming our way, man. We need some heat out here in Western Canada. Hey, Nathan, one of the big issues right now is this issue of the capital gains changes that was announced in the budget. A lot of concern from many farm groups, including CCA. What is CCA's ask to the current federal government in terms of these changes they're proposing?
Well, the capital gains tax seems to be coming in effect very quickly. And to be honest with you, our position is it hasn't even been studied properly by our accountants. It hasn't been studied properly by our producers. And rushing into something like this, we're really worried about the effect that it's going to have on the family farm when it comes time for a transition.
Do you feel that is being heard? Because we continue to hear from the government is that this is impacting a very low amount percentage-wise of Canadians. And those it does impact are more wealthy Canadians. So if it's impacting a farm, that's a wealthy Canadian. Therefore, they need to pay, as the finance minister would say, their fair share. What's your response to that?
Yeah, we've raised this with the government, and we continue to raise it with the government, as late as Friday last week. These unintended consequences. I mean, the finance minister came out and said that what it was intended and targeted for. But, once we take a deeper dive and look at the numbers on this, and we've got to continue to hold this off until the actual work is done on it to see how it is going to affect the average producer and the average family farm, farm family. It's these unknowns. And then once again, we're rushing into this, it seems, without being able to answer all the questions.
Yeah. Well, speaking of unknowns, that when the more unknowns there are and variables, it definitely increases risk. At Real Agri Studies, we'd asked not just people in the cattle industry, but just all Canadian producers in terms of risk in 2024 relative to last year. I think it was like 75% of producers felt that 24 was a more riskier year than last year. So risk is a big topic on Canadian farms and ranches. Where are we at with the livestock price insurance? There's been a big push by CCA over the past number of years to make this a national program. Are you making any headway with that?
Yeah, there was an announcement in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick PEI, that they've actually offered it out now. Nova Scotia is lagging a little behind, so there's 3 more provinces that will be on that. We're excited, and I've started this initiative a decade ago to try to get this in the Maritimes to make it a more national program. So, it is bittersweet finally to see it here. Unfortunately, under the circumstances, we're missing out pretty much on a full year of potential sign-ons. So, I hope our governments recognize that when they're trying to tally the numbers and interest parties is a 2-year kind of pilot in the East to try it. You're going to be down to 1 year of signing. The way they've kind of timelined this. So, yes, rewarding and happy that we've got movement on it, but there is more work to be done. And I hope they don't, basically take this year's numbers as a signal of where it's at for uptake in across the country.
Why is this taking so long? What is there to pilot at this point? We do have provinces that have livestock price insurance, for example, Saskatchewan. What's the issue here? Why have to do a pilot at this point? Isn't it proven out in other areas of the country?
Yeah, I believe so. The bilateral agreements that had to be signed, I think they wanted to test the waters to see how this is out. But, it gets us back to what we continue to say to government is we need equitable programs across all commodities. And, if you've got crop insurance that has been in place across the country for decades, this is just a given that should happen for beef. We're often wondering why we're seeing land conversion rates, and it is issues like not having these programs available, and we're trying to fast track, play catch up here a bit, and get the governments to realize this. And it never moves as fast as we like to see, but we are making some progress. So there is some silver lining on this.
Okay, and last week I heard, sticking with stuff like prices and taxes, we also had an announcement when it came to the livestock tax deferral changes. What do producers need to know about that?
Yeah, they're widening the zone and going to have a buffer zone. CCA has been really pushing hard for all classes of cattle and self-declaration, and that way there we don't have to worry about border lines. When we spoke to Minister McCauley and his staff, it was in the budget that they were going to make changes, and so I commend them for moving on making some changes, which is going to be an early designation with only 1 month of rainfall data, as opposed to waiting to see how much actually comes over a period of the summer. So farmers and producers can react more quickly, and then these buffer zones outside the municipality lines or border lines are supposed to give more flexibility to reach those producers that often sometimes are just on the opposite side of the road of the rainfall and don't qualify. So, again, not everything we're pushing for, and we continue to work at this. And we did have commitment from the minister that they're going to continue to listen to us and try to make more changes to make this more of a tool in certain situations where producers need it. But again, not exactly 100% of everything that we've been asking for.
Yeah. What's been left out that would be the thing where you'd be like, hey, this should really be included here?
Yeah, we're really saying the self-declaration piece. It's you're not avoiding taxes. You're just punting them down the road because of a situation where you had to move, and that way there you don't have to worry about lines or border lines. And then the other one is all classes of cattle. First and foremost, it's on the breeding herd. That is what we need to grow. That is what we need to use to expand. So we can see, and glad that they're going to continue to push that. But there are operations out there that do graze, that do put yearlings on, and sometimes it affects their bottom line. So we're trying to include those that are missed as well.
Yeah, and if people are watching this this video, they see that you are in your tractor right now, which is probably a bit of a refreshing change for you, because I know you've been spending a lot of time in Ottawa meeting with MPs and senators and other officials trying to push some of these issues. Do you feel that the livestock industry's interests from CCA's perspective are those the points you're bringing? Are they accepting? Is there an understanding of what some of the issues are for individual producers out in cattle country?
Yeah, we've been pushing as hard or harder than we ever have on a lot of these issues, and I look at some of the headway we're making, on our environmental story that haven't been listened to, and trying to progress on some changes on some risk management tools. On a wider scale, I think it's agriculture as a whole that the government needs to pay more attention to. Very seldom do you really hear agriculture making the headlines, or topping the budget. This is one of the biggest producing countries for agri-products in the world, and especially on cattle, with the room that's here, the environmental story, the sustainability story that we have. We should really be promoting and fostering programs to grow the industry. And it gets us back to capital gains. We're at an age of farmers where, succession is real, and we're on the upside of older as opposed to younger. And there is interest in the younger producers coming on or coming back to the farm. But we need to have tools available, and we can't let things like capital gains tax hinder the ability to maneuver a farm. So I think we're being heard, and I really hope sincerely that they take our messaging seriously. We're not ones, well, we do complain a lot sometimes, but we're not ones to just complain about nothing. And our concerns are valid. And, so on the capital gains side, hopefully when we get more data and the accountants move and see where this is going to land, we can have a deeper discussion. But we really hope that they can pause this until we have those in hand, so we're not actually hurting, transition and moving farms down to the next generation.
Yeah, well put. Well, hey, Nathan, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio. Really, really appreciate it. I'll let you get back to what you're doing out there in the field, fire that tractor back up, and get some work done. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Shaun. Take care.
That is Nathan Phinney, president of the Canadian Cattle Association. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it is hot in parts of Canada and the United States. So today's Farm Safety Roundup is extremely timely. High heat, high humidity, high exposure to the sun are definitely safety issues that really need to be thought about as we are working in this kind of environment. So today we're looking at heat stress and steps farmers and their workers can take to prevent it. Shawn Chadwick is a health and safety consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services who grew up in the tradition of family farming. Thanks for joining us today, Shawn. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. Heat stress is a serious threat to farm workers, and we're going to talk about some of the basics here today. So I guess off the top, what is heat stress, and why should farmers be taking precautions?
Yeah, the long and the short of it in basic terms is heat stress occurs when the body is unable to rid itself of excessive heat that's building up internally. If you're a farmer, you're not estranged to a hard day's work where you've got sweat coming off your brow, and that is your body's built-in cooling system to try and cool its internal core temperature down. But heat stress and heat strokes start to happen when that is not sufficient anymore. And that's where things start to become a little bit of not only a problem, but can also turn deadly. It causes your core body temperature to rise and your heart rate to increase. The body is really trying over time to bring that body temperature down, but it really just is not able to during the hot summer months, especially when different climates across the country might have higher humidity levels. It hinders the body's ability to use those sweat glands to cool you down. And really, part of the reason that we want to target this is not only do we want to keep our workers safe, but speaking as someone who's been on the farm, who's had family farms growing up my whole life, downtime is a bad time on the farm. And sometimes we might think that, it's not a big deal. We've all grown up in heat, but what can really start to happen is if someone is adversely affected by heat stress or heat stroke is that can cause even more downtime on the farm. So let alone keeping our workers safe, but we're going to have an increase in shortage on manpower and man hours. So 15 minutes an hour may save you 4, 5, 6, or even more days of lost manpower from a worker. So it's a like you said, it's a hot topic that we need to zero in on.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so we know that heat stress can be life-threatening. Now, there could be short and long-term effects. What should we be looking out for in ourselves or others that we're working with? And give us some example of some of those heat-related illnesses.
Yeah, for sure. So some short-term key indicators could be things like fatigue, which can kind of mask itself because, I mean, you're out in the field or out in the barn working hard. Lightheadedness, dizziness, headache, and weakness. One of the things also, though, that can start to branch from heat stress into heat stroke is your mental capacity starts to become impaired. Confusion is very common, and that's why it's so important to not work alone and have some sort of a buddy system, because if you are starting to breach into the danger zone, you might not even recognize it in yourself, and someone else might need to see the warning signs starting in you. So especially when you're, I understand that there's things that need to get done on the farm, but make sure that you do have a way of even checking in on everybody, just to make sure that people are okay. And if you don't have a response from someone, that you have a way to check in on them to make sure that they are okay. Some other symptoms that you may want to look out for are heat rash, where there's red bumps on the skin that crosses into severe itching, blurred vision, cramps, swelling of the hands and feet. It can also go into fainting, which is, I mean, a pretty obvious sign. This is mainly caused by fluid loss and not enough water intake, so where there's been excessive sweating and you're not replenishing your body's fluid levels. Other things can cross into, again, heat exhaustion, where your body's cooling system is starting to break down. And where this starts to really become dangerous is where this starts to cross into heat stroke, which is an immediate medical emergency where someone needs to find medical attention quickly, because this can turn fatal. One of the key indicators for heat stroke is your body's cooling system has completely shut down and you've stopped sweating. So if you should be sweating and you're not sweating, there is a very large issue and you need medical attention immediately.
Yeah, there is nothing that is fun about heat stroke. It's
no,
very, very serious. So, okay, so we talked about, heat and temperature, but we need to look beyond that thermometer reading. What are some of the other factors that contribute to heat stress?
Yeah, so we already kind of alluded to it before when I was talking about, that dry Alberta heat versus, that humid Ontario heat. Humidity and the humidex factor, that can really impair your body's ability to cool down, simply because there's moisture in the air, there's moisture on your body, and that moisture on your skin is not able to evaporate the same way as if it was a dry atmosphere in a dry condition. Other things, radiant heat sources. So if you're working next to some sort of a piece of equipment that's got hot exhaust coming off of it all day, that's going to increase the temperature that you're working in. As well, if you're working any type of like a hot house or greenhouse, the temperature inside of those is going to be 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit higher than it is outside. So again, wanting to make sure that, okay, it might only be, 24 outside today Celsius, but inside of the hot house, it's 34. So just keeping an eye on things like that. And another thing that a lot of people might not be thinking about is some of the PPE that we put onto our workers, like respirators. I know a lot of farms use pesticides, so they've got some sort of a covering or a hazmat suit on that really, again, limits the body's ability to cool itself down. So when you are putting controls into place, it's important to take a moment, stop, and evaluate using a race method, just to make sure that you're not introducing a hazard that you weren't intending to. Strenuous work, I mean, it's going to happen on the farm, but that can also be something that plays into this a little bit. And then also, you mentioned it and kind of alluded to it, is this is going to be different from person to person. Someone who grew up in a hot climate might be a little bit more accustomed to what they have to work in, where someone who maybe didn't grow up in the area where they're doing the work, I'm thinking about even something that's very common in Canada, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. Just being cognizant that your workers might be working in a brand new environment that they've never really have been accustomed to. So making sure that our workers are okay, that they're getting the breaks that they need, the fluids that they need, and just checking in with our workers to make sure that they're safe throughout the day.
Okay, so you sort of already hinted on this a little bit, but what should farmers do to prevent heat stress for themselves or their workers?
Yeah, so I mean, really, like you said, I kind of alluded to it already. Is the first thing is recognizing that you have hazards. No workplace, including agriculture firms, are free of hazards. Everyone has them. So the first part of this is recognizing them. We're going to include some free tools and resources at the end of today that people can visit to get some templates, and so they don't have to reinvent the wheel here, but really starting at recognizing, seeing where the hazards are, looking for the things that I mentioned before. Are people bundled up inside of PPE? Are people working in direct sunlight the entire day? Is there a high humidex at different parts of the year that we need to be aware of? So really looking and recognizing where those hazards are, and then assessing, seeing how much risk is actually associated with the work that you're doing, seeing if you have any controls in place. Do you have any shade structures, even trees around? I know in the prairies, such as Saskatchewan, I mean, you can go for miles without a tree. So, do we need to build maybe some sort of a shade structure for our workers to take their breaks in instead of standing out in the direct sun? Or is there some sort of like a tractor that we could go and sit in just in case we need to cool off? Because, again, shade is valuable. When we're talking about this subject, it can be 15 or 20 degrees cooler in the shade as opposed to being out in the direct sun. The next thing is to put controls in place. Work rest cycles are huge for combating this, making sure that water is readily available, cooler water if possible, for our workers throughout the day. And then also educating our workers that they can not only recognize signs of heat stress and heat stroke in themselves, but also, like I mentioned, that they can recognize it in one another. Because sometimes your mental capacity is a little bit fatigued, as not only are you, breaking a sweat in doing your job and focused on your job, but your mental capacity can also be fatigued just by, again, the heat. So making sure that we're aware of what it looks like in one another. Some other things that you can do are in that control area is making sure that you have people that are first aid certified. And aware of how to administer first aid to someone that is experiencing heat stress or heat stroke, and also that people are aware of emergency procedures should something like that happen, and what emergency numbers need to be contacted. Completing a heat stress plan, like again, I've already mentioned it and kind of outlined it a little bit here. Another thing that you can do that's really easy is downloading a weather app onto your phone or mobile device. And then I know a lot of farmers already do this for their crops, but seeing what the temperature and UV indexes and humidex is for the next couple days. And then seeing, do I need to put some extra controls in place for my workers as they're out in the fields or doing whatever work in direct sun or in very hot environments. Other things that you can do are posting signage and infographics. Again, we're going to post some resources that you can look at for posters just to educate workers, and you can post them in cafeterias, lunch areas, on pieces of equipment, just to remind workers of what to look for as they're working on the farm.
Yeah. Like I think about the time growing up on the farm where you're doing stuff where you're out in the elements and it's going to be a super hot day. I think of roguing seed fields as a kid. We would start super early in the morning, to make sure we kind of miss that heat of the day. Those are just, some of there's other things that you can do to kind of align the job with the time of the day, right?
Absolutely. And, it really depends on what type of farm we're talking about here. I mean, like you said, there are things that you can do and shift your jobs to different parts of the day. But if that's not necessarily something that you can do, there is always controls that we can put in place to make sure that our people are safe. Because at the end of the day, not only do we want everyone to go home the same way that they came to work, but we also want to keep the farm going.
Well, hey, Shaun, thanks for joining us here today on the Farm Safety Roundup. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
For more resources on topics like this and more around farm safety, go to wsps.ca/farm safety. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio with the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Clearly way too talkative today. Clearly, because we have very little time for any sort of ag news. But I did want to mention this announcement yesterday from Farm Credit Canada. They're committing $5 million to the GIFTS breeding program. That announcement happened yesterday at Canada's Farm Show between GIFTS, University of Saskatchewan, and FCC. The program will now bear the name the FCC Accelerated Breeding Program at GIFTS. So accelerated breeding combines technologies such as genomic selection, speed breeding, bioinformatics, and computer simulation to increase the rate of genetic gain for crop and livestock breeding programs, delivering new products into the hands of producers 2 to 3 years faster and improving agronomics, quality, and disease-resistant traits, says FCC. Big crowd. We have a full breakdown of the announcement and really got some good pictures that I took too, because I was there. Good pictures that I took that are the featured image in this story. So go to realagriculture.com and check that out. In other news, the U.S. markets were closed today due to a national holiday. Some interesting data. The Eurasia Group poll on the U.S.-Canada relationship asked folks on both sides of the border whether they think of their neighbor as a partner, competitor, or adversary, and 67% of Americans see Canada as a partner, 10% as a competitor, and 3% as an enemy. A whopping 82% of Biden voters see Canada as a partner, compared to 61% of Trump voters. North of the 49th parallel in Canada, 66% of Canadians see the U.S. as a partner, 17% competitor, and 2% enemy, with no differences across partisan lines. Interesting. You can be a partner and a competitor. I think we are. I don't think those are two mutually exclusive things at all, really. Like I said, we have no time for news today. So if you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Remember, I need some help. What advice would you give a student in graduating from grade 12 right now? Let her fly, everybody. Thanks for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio.